Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Christy Rugg, and I will be the background moderator for today's presentation. Before we get started, I'd like to review a few logistics. Please be aware that today's webinar session is being live captioned, and I will drop the link in the chat. It's also being recorded. Whether you are using a computer or phone audio, please mute your microphones and/or your telephone microphone for the duration of this webinar. You can also turn off your video. We just want to see our panelists. Do not put the call on hold for any reason, as it will disrupt the audio for everyone. You may use the chat section at any time during the session to communicate with the webinar hosts and alert us to any technical difficulties during the presentation. We will troubleshoot with you as needed. If there are any issues with the captioning service, please notify us in the chat immediately. There will not be any slides for today's presentation. However, the presentation will be recorded and archived on the Common Learning Portal for later reference. The question and answer portion of the webinar will occur near the end of the hour-long discussion. To ask a question during this portion of the call, either submit it to the chat section and we will read it out to our two panelists, or click on the raise your hand button so we can unmute you when the time is appropriate. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Ray.
Okay, thank you, Christy. My name is Ray Bloomer. I'm an accessibility specialist with the Accessibility Support Program from out of Washington. And, excuse me. Today's call is Disability Dialogue number 5, and it is focusing on individuals with cognitive and intellectual disabilities. Our panelists are Kathy Pratt, who is director of the Resource Center for Autism at Indiana University, and also Jordan Oliver, who is a student at Indiana University, who happens to be on the autism spectrum. So what I'd like to do is turn it over to Kathy first. And Kathy, if you would introduce yourself, give us a little bit of your background, who you are, what do you do?
Sure. I currently direct the Indiana Resource Center for Autism, which is at the Indiana Institute on Disability and Community at Indiana University. And you can plug in our website, and I'm blessed with an incredible staff who develop wonderful articles and materials and visual supports for folks on the spectrum. And prior to becoming the director of the Indiana Resource Center for Autism, I was a classroom teacher for many years who worked with individuals all along the autism spectrum and those who had physical disabilities and also cognitive disabilities as well.
Thank you, Kathy. And Jordan Oliver, I would like you to tell us a little bit about yourself, and maybe if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about your disability.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Jordan Oliver. I also live in Indianapolis. I'm currently a law student here at IU's law school, and I was diagnosed with autism when I was 11, specifically Asperger's syndrome. And I'm excited to talk to you guys a little bit about how you can accommodate individuals like myself today.
Okay, thank you. Jordan, as a person who is on the autism spectrum, as the state of Indiana has been opening up, more restaurants are open, you can go to more stores, grocery stores, so on. And also as a student going to the university, are there issues, barriers that you have faced as a result of the changes because of COVID-19 that may have affected you because of your disability?
Yeah, I think that the number one thing that comes to mind for me is probably just routine. I think that myself and others with autism really like having something that's routine and repetitive. And I think COVID has really messed with that, obviously, to where the schedule of everything has kind of changed, how everything is conducted. My school, all of my classes went from in person to 4 out of 6 of them online, and just learning to adjust to that. And that can be a difficulty for sure.
Okay. Kathy, as you are addressing issues relating to COVID-19 through the Resource Center and how it might affect other individuals with cognitive and intellectual disabilities. Could you also address that issue as to the changes that some people might face as the state and other facilities are expanding their operation?
So, Ray, first of all, what I want to say is that whether an individual has a cognitive disability or they have an autism spectrum disorder, each one is very different. It's very purposeful that we call autism a spectrum disorder, because if you know one person with autism, you know one person with autism. So it becomes very difficult to make generalizations. I think what is lovely is with people like Jordan, they can speak about their experiences and personalize them so that professionals and family members can get better insight into what it feels like. So as individuals with cognitive disabilities and autism spectrum disorders are starting to come out of isolation or quarantine and starting to go back into the world, I think one of the things that you have to realize is that they will feel our reactions. They will feel our anxiety. I was just in a school yesterday, and what I could tell of the individuals that I was spending time with who have both cognitive disabilities and an autism spectrum disorder is that when staff were more anxious and not as calm, we saw more behaviors actually occur in those places. So, and then as individuals are coming out of quarantine and they're going into the community more, we're dealing with things like how to wear masks. You know, some of our folks are doing a great job of wearing masks, and some of our individuals are having tremendous difficulty with it. So part of the diagnosis of an autism spectrum disorder are related to sensory issues. So how these individuals process, interpret, and understand the world is going to be very different. And so things that you and I may find pleasurable are painful for our folks on the spectrum. And so we have provided visual supports to help people, help to sensitize kids to wearing masks so that they're able to do that more in community settings. I think also just to understand social distancing. It is very hard, even under the best of circumstances, for individuals on the autism spectrum and those with cognitive disabilities to understand how close to stand to somebody. And so one of the things that we have to do is to kind of give them very concrete ideas. And we've done things like mark things on the floor or put hula hoops around people just to help people understand that they can't go up and hug folks. I think it also is really helpful, regardless of the type of individual you're working with, and probably for even those who don't have any disability, is that we have to be very concrete in our expectations. So abstract is a lot more difficult for folks to understand. So, you know, to be very definitive and concrete about what the individual is supposed to do helps the individuals to participate more fully.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Jordan, I want to come back to you and address the one of the issues that Kathy just mentioned, and that's the issue of mask wearing. Have you found that Kathy addressed the issue of individuals who are on the autism spectrum wearing the mask? Do you find when others are wearing the mask that it affects you in any way differently, and also other people that you may have spoken with that are also on the spectrum?
Yeah, I'm a very visual person, and so the mask definitely presents, people wearing masks definitely present a difficulty in trying to listen when I can't keep their mouths and kind of follow along. Kind of going to what Kathy said with to just being able to have that visual cue. So I like whenever I go someplace and I have like the the circles on the ground, like in an elevator, for instance, to have like one circle in the front, one circle in the back, kind of just showing you where to stand. So the same goes there. I've seen a few people wear clear masks, and I think that helps a little bit.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Hey, Jordan, sorry, Ray, before you continue, Jordan, can we check your microphone? It was pretty garbled and we lost some of what you said in the captions.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Okay. Kathy, again, getting back to the issue of masks, have you, in some of the interactions that you've had in going to the schools, have you noticed whether some people are reacting to others wearing masks in a negative way?
You know, honestly, I haven't seen that. And I think that in truth, kids have done much better than we all thought they would. And I think sometimes it's almost harder for adults. I know for individuals who are working on learning how to communicate, it's very difficult while they're working with their speech therapist to not be able to see the mouth. So, you know, that has had an impact. But I think, you know, again, parents, we've really worked with parents, and parents talk a lot about the kind of mask to wear, what kind of material it should be. I know for some kids, they're really sensitive to having things over their ears, so we have to work with that. So it really is more about how the child themselves is processing that mask. I don't see it so much with them, with their interaction with staff.
Okay. I'd like to come back to you, Jordan, and kind of bring this to the folks that are our audience. And that is people that work in national parks, whether they are rangers, volunteers, or in any type of support staff positions. Are there any issues that you have faced in going out into any park or recreation issues? I don't know if you've been able to do any of that since COVID-19 has affected our world. And if you have, is there any issues that you've noticed?
Yeah, so are you guys able to hear me clearly right now? I tried to fix the microphone.
Yeah, that sounds better.
Yes.
And Kathy, if you can mute while Jordan talks, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, so I did, during the pandemic, I have visited the Great Smoky Mountains Park. And one thing that I would say that I notice is would help is if the parks would stick to routines as much as possible. I know that some things have to be changed due to circumstances, but I think that, like, for instance, if I've been to a park before, I'm going to come back to the park and expect things to be the same the next time around. And so whenever I went there and things were so different, that kind of threw me off a little bit. And then just maybe visual cues throughout the park to set clear expectations. Like Kathy was saying, it's hard for me to understand like things that are abstract, and so having those concrete rules would help.
Okay. Kathy, I'm going to ask you if you would also be willing to discuss some of those similar issues. And one of the things that is occurring is that many of our national park facilities right now are only opening up in the outdoor parts of the facilities, and rather than opening up visitor centers, which are only opened up so that people can get to and from restrooms, they're setting up tables outside so that they can still provide some visitor services, and yet it's very different from going into a visitor center. Could you also address how some other individuals with cognitive and intellectual disabilities may react, or how staff should react relative to some of these issues?
So I have extensive experience with individuals who have severe cognitive disabilities. And, you know, one of my comments about that would be that in all likelihood, when you have someone with a certain degree of a cognitive disability, they are probably going to be with either a staff person or they're going to be with a parent. And so one of the things that I would really suggest is to defer to them, defer to the parent or the staff member, and ask them what works with the individual or not. We also know that for individuals on the spectrum, that anxiety is major. We see individuals on the spectrum who have co-occurring challenges going on, and so they come to us with very complicated issues sometimes. So I think that, again, as much as your staff, as your personnel, can stay calm, consistent, I know that many of our folks, whether they have an autism spectrum disorder or a cognitive disability, really benefit from visual supports. They are visual learners. And so if there are visual things that you can put into place to help guide them, that will be really important. So I think, again, working with the staff, I think also being aware, hopefully families will let you know if they have a child, especially since you're outdoor, if they have a child who elopes. We know in the autism community and in the broader disability community that elopement, individuals running away, is an issue. And it is unfortunately one of the reasons that we've lost some of the individuals in our autism community. And so if hopefully finding out from the families or getting a sense from the families if there's any concerns about them having free access to the facilities. And I think probably for the parks, having kind of a plan in place. If you do have a child who elopes, and I'm sure that you have that, or if you have a child, if there's water, who gets into the water, what is the best response in terms of dealing with that?
Kathy, relative to what you just indicated as far as setting up that communication between the family and National Park Service staff or volunteers, are there some things, if the family does not sort of self-identify, are there some issues that our staff should be aware of in terms of some behaviors or anything else that would help so that people can offer or alter their behavior or offer assistance?
It might be helpful. And again, I don't understand enough about your park system to know if this is feasible, but it may be helpful just to have a series of questions that you can ask. For example, asking the family member or the individual themselves or the professionals who are supporting them, how does this individual communicate? Jordan is very verbal, but some of our folks are minimally verbal. Some of them use augmentative communication devices, whether they're high-tech electronic communication devices or lower tech communication devices. I think the other thing is to ask the families, because I want it to be very positive and proactive, are there things that your son or daughter especially likes, that they get joy out of, that helps them have a successful experience? Because if you can understand those, then you can set things up in a more proactive and positive way. Again, I think what's hard is, autism is a spectrum disorder, and every individual is very different. Jordan shares common characteristics with others on the spectrum, but how he manifests those characteristics are going to be very different. We know that some of our folks like to be touched, others do not. Some have a hard time with loud noises. So to understand, to ask the family, does your son or daughter have any sensory issues that are going to make this harder? So, using a loud voice or having horns blowing or whistles or whatever can be really painful for some of our folks and actually could lead to some behavioral issues. Some of our individuals don't like to be touched, and even a light touch to them will feel painful, whereas deeper pressure will. And then I don't know how you would frame this, but I think maybe a question that just says anything else that you can do anything else you can tell us that will help us better support your son or daughter on the spectrum, or you as an individual on the autism spectrum. We work a lot with individuals on the spectrum, helping them to self-advocate. Jordan is a perfect example of that. And we also work with individuals who have cognitive disabilities and their support team, how to advocate for them as well. So I think, listening to the lead of the people that are surrounding the individual as well. And I would imagine, Jordan, that there are situations that your wife knows when you're getting a little bit more anxious or when you need to kind of take a break or you need to have something else. Is that true?
Yes, that's true. I mean, she can kind of pick up on things at this point that that other people might not be able to. But kind of going off what you said, like me personally, I don't like touch, or I guess that's one of the good things about COVID with the social distancing is like one thing I don't like is packed spaces, and so that's COVID's kind of eliminated that anxiety for me a little bit.
And I've heard from other people on the spectrum that COVID has actually been positive because they don't really like to shake hands. And it's kind of nice that they're not shaking hands with people now. And because of the social distancing, folks have a tendency not to like to have a lot of people grouped together. And so this is really the perfect opportunity for them. And I think the other thing that you need to know about individuals on the spectrum is that many of them don't like to make eye contact. And in effect, if they are not looking at you, that does not mean that they're not listening to you. And probably if they're not looking at you because our folks are single channeled, they actually may be processing the information easier if they can kind of divert their eye gaze.
Along the lines of whether some people prefer close relationships or close proximity, and Kathy, you had said some people, especially younger people, like to hug or touch, whereas others don't. On the other hand, many staff people right now are as concerned with their own health as they are about our visitors. What type of behavior, or how should a ranger behave if they are with an individual who really does start to advance towards them for hugging, handshaking, or any type of physical contact? Because you still want that reaction or interaction rather to be positive. You don't want to make someone feel bad because they maybe might be a little bit aggressive in appearance because they want to hug.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the things that I would say is that whatever facility or whatever program it is, there should be a consistent message to individuals, because when we're inconsistent, then people are very confused about what the expectations are. So if some folks want to be hugged and others don't, then the individual is going to be, whether they have a cognitive disability or an autism spectrum disorder, they're going to be trying to figure out which person you are. Are you the person who likes to hug, or are you the person who doesn't like to hug? And then we also know that with our folks, very concretely, like, arm's length away, and have the individual hold their arm up so that they understand that there has to be a distance. And I know that some people are kind of doing the elbow bump. So, but, I think as concretely as you can explain it. And again, we develop things called social stories. And you're going to be sharing some of the resources through the Indiana Institute on Disability and Community. We have a lot of social stories that individuals can have read to them to practice, to rehearse what the expectations are when they go into a facility or program.
Okay, thank you. Jordan, are there pieces of advice that you would give our rangers and volunteers on behavior that you would like to see, either things that they're doing you want to reinforce, or things that they're not doing that you would like to see them do? Keep in mind that, like as I said, right now most of our facilities in national parks. And when I say national parks, some of our national parks are natural areas. Some of them are cultural areas, such as historic parks. And as we go into the future, we're also going to be having our historic sites open up, so we'll have house tours and things like that. Could you address that as you see your participation in the future while we're still under this umbrella of COVID-19?
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of what Kathy said, just being consistent with what you do. So, like I said, when I visited the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, that's one thing I noticed having been there before. It seemed like things were a little bit different than it had been, obviously because of the circumstances. And so I think being consistent, and then in terms of, you said the historical sites where maybe you might be in a house, maybe making it spacious, maybe making it to where it has like good flow so that areas aren't packed. I've been to some places like that to where the flow of the building it kind of set up for where there was large congregations of people, and that kind of made me anxious too.
Thanks, Jordan. And that last piece that you just talked about with crowded spaces and being anxious, I think that's one of the advantages, at least for a while, that Kathy pointed out, where COVID-19 may have been positive in some ways, because I know in most national park settings, anything that are related to walks, talks, tours, anything along those lines, including even the number of people that may at some point go into a visitor center theater, will be much more limited than it was in the past for a while. And the other issue is that the national parks are not mandating the use of masks, but we are highly recommending that people use masks. Along those lines, Kathy, if rangers do recommend that people wear masks, could you foresee circumstances where some people may not be comfortable doing that? And how should a person discuss that issue?
I think it's really important, if that's their choice, the Park Service's choice or the facility's choice or program's choice, is that they clarify that up front for people to understand what the expectations are. Again, I think that when we're inconsistent, that creates the opportunities for challenges. And, you know, people feel very strongly about the use of masks or not. And that's true of family members in the autism community as well, that some of them really hate that their children have to wear masks. I think that they're adjusting to the fact, because it's mandated in so many states to have a mask on. So I think just having those expectations clearly stated up front will be really important.
Okay. Christy, I was wondering if we could check to see if we have any questions in the chat, or if you have any questions.
I do have questions in the chat. So the first one is, do you have a social story that you could share for going into public places? I have an 18-year-old daughter on the spectrum, and her virtual school is talking about what is and what isn't social distancing, but a social story for being in public would be good.
On our website for the Indiana Resource Center for Autism, we have a full catalog of social stories and also of visual supports. I don't know if there's a specific one for that. If there isn't, you're welcome to email me and I can have my staff work on it.
I'll be sure to add that link to the Common Learning portal when we put this recording up, so that people have access to that. The next question is, some school programs come to the parks and the teacher doesn't disclose students who are on the spectrum. Are there things we can do or not do that will help rangers who work with school groups in general to cover if there is a possibility there is someone on the spectrum?
Yeah, I'm sure that there is, because we've got FERPA, which is that, you know, a privacy act. I'm sure that they have to be protective of disclosing about a person's disability sometimes. I think, you know, regardless of what the individual's challenge is, anybody's effectiveness with them is going to be based on the rapport you can establish with them. And what I know is, for individuals who have are on the autism spectrum or have a cognitive disability, is that the calmer that you can be, the more direct you can be, and that'll help with establishing rapport quite a bit. The other thing that you may not know, which is would be interesting to know, and maybe a way that you ask the teachers, is to say, do you have individuals who have a special interest? So individuals on the autism spectrum, one of the things that they oftentimes have is what we call a fixation or a fascination. So I've worked with individuals through the years who have fascinations with, you know, ceiling fans, with vacuum cleaners, with the weather, with movie credits, a whole host of things. Temple Grandin, who is probably one of the most famous, well-known people on the autism spectrum, her fascination was with sliding glass doors, and she used those to create livestock handling units for meat production all over the world. So I think understanding also that our folks do have those fixations or fascinations. And so if you can find that common interest with our folks, that's a really wonderful way of connecting with them. I think, the word that comes to mind anytime that you want to have a connection with an individual, whether it's a child or an adult, it's that relationship building. And what's hard is that you're in situations where you're seeing individuals for short periods of time. But I will also tell you this, parents of individuals on the spectrum say that their children are the best job interviewers, that when somebody comes into their home who they are interviewing for providing respite care or some other support to their son or daughter, their children are very quick studies about whether this individual is going to be a good match for them or not. And they just read it according to their calmness and the fact that they aren't anxious around the individual.
Awesome.
Christy, any other questions?
Yes, we do have another one. This one says, when talking about visual cues for directions, would you recommend maps to go through spaces along with written directions?
Jordan, what do you think?
I personally prefer pictures, so stuff like that. Maybe you can include written ones too, but whenever I go to places, I really enjoy the actual like graphics and stuff like that. That really helps.
And again, we have some individuals on the spectrum who their fascination is actually maps. So I think just having a range of visual supports available is really powerful for our folks.
Along that lines of what you just said, Kathy, with maps, we have within the wide range of different national park settings that we have, multiple different types of maps. We'll have maps that will be inside the primary park brochure. We'll have maps at trailheads. Many of our parks will have tactile or three-dimensional maps, battlefield maps, boundary maps, all types of maps. Are there certain types of maps that might be more functional or more usable for certain portions of the population? And along those lines, is there any advice as to how our staff can utilize maps in that interaction?
I think that if you have all those options of maps and you have someone who comes to the park who loves maps, they're going to be thrilled with the options. I think on the other hand, I think as much as you can, for the general population of individuals with cognitive disabilities, as simplified as you can make it will be really important. Fewer distractions and just really clear cut, what's available. Ray, can we talk about something else really quickly?
Yes.
Because when you're interacting around people with autism and Jordan is considered to be one of our higher functioning folks. But individuals on the spectrum some of them have cognitive disabilities or intellectual disabilities and an autism spectrum. And one of the things that is the most challenging for those of us who interact with people on the spectrum are the presence of pretty challenging behaviors sometimes. And so whenever an individual is put into a new situation that may create anxiety, it may manifest itself in terms of a behavior. And those behaviors can include things like self-injurious behavior or aggression or running away or a whole host of things. And those will be the exceptions rather than the rule. But I think it's important as you're interacting in a park situation, is that I would really defer to the staff or the adult with that individual and ask what kind of help you can provide. Sometimes they will need help or they may need you to kind of oversee another child or another individual. It's going to be very rare, but there are situations that we see where individuals will have what we call meltdowns in new situations. Is that safe to say, Jordan?
Yes.
Kathy, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind taking a moment and define for many, many years, you just heard of a person with autism, and then we started to hear about people on the autism spectrum. And I know you had identified earlier, if you met one person with autism, you only know one person with autism. Could you define a little bit what is meant by the spectrum?
So it used to be that autism, under the heading of autism, was something called pervasive developmental disorders, not otherwise specified, and those were mild forms. Asperger's, which were higher functioning autism, and then autism. And then there were some other things like childhood disintegrative disorder. So at some point, all of these diagnostic labels are included in a book called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, 5th edition. And there was the realization, and I saw this in Indiana as well, is that you could take a person on the autism spectrum and move them to different places in Indiana, and they would get those different diagnostic labels. So instead of having different diagnostic labels under autism, what they decided to do is just to say autism is a spectrum disorder because each individual is so different. And so that includes, individuals. And when we look at the spectrum, again, we have some individuals who are highly verbal and some who are nonverbal. We have some individuals who really want to have relationships with others, and then some who really prefer to be alone. We have some individuals who are highly gifted, and then we have some individuals who have a severe cognitive disability. So it's a spectrum because each individual is so different. And while they share those common characteristics of challenges in terms of communication, social skills, and those repetitive behaviors, how they manifest those is very different.
Thank you. Jordan, since you are on the higher functioning end of the spectrum, are there things that you would prefer that rangers do or not do if you were on, let's say, we'll go back to your experience at the Great Smokies. If you were on a nature walk with a ranger, are there things that, as part of that group of visitors, that you would prefer that the ranger do, or some things that you would prefer that they not do on that walk that would make you feel more comfortable or make you enjoy that more?
I've never really been on a nature walk. Do you mean just like giving us a tour outside?
Yeah, okay. Exactly.
So I would say just like not walking so close. Maybe if a bear or something were to come out, to stay calm, because like Kathy said, like I would probably see their panic and then start panicking myself. And so maybe just being calm under emergency circumstances like that. I'm trying to think of some other things. Maybe just.
I would think.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I would think you just brought up the issue of something like a bear or other types of wildlife that you would want to have a lot of safety information given to you in advance and in a pretty clear manner. Yeah.
Because just having a situation like that, I wouldn't really know what to do. And so, like you said, maybe talking about that beforehand, like knowing when we go out, if this happens, this is what we'll do. If such and such happens, like these are the steps that we're going to take. Just knowing those concrete steps, or kind of going off that, just knowing what the kind of itinerary is for the nature walk, like what are all the things that we're doing, instead of kind of just going out and just following the ranger.
Okay, great, thank you. Kathy, I'd like you to, if you wouldn't mind, provide another little bit of definition, and that is the word cognitive. That's something that you always see cognitive and intellectual disabilities come together. Could you give a little bit of a definition or description for our staff all over to have an idea, what does that really mean?
Well, we've used to refer to it as mental retardation, and that kind of has become not such a fashionable term. So cognitive disability or intellectual disability are used interchangeably, and it's considered the more politically correct form, but it refers to mental retardation. And we know that there's levels of mental retardation, and how that's usually measured is according to IQ tests. And so we have individuals who have mild cognitive disability or mild mental retardation, all the way down to those who have severe and profound mental retardation. And those are individuals who would be primarily nonverbal, and then everything in between. And so individuals, like if you've worked with individuals with Down syndrome, they can also have either a severe cognitive disability, a moderate cognitive disability, or even a mild cognitive disability. So the mental retardation will occur in addition to other disabilities as well. So individuals on the autism spectrum can either be incredibly gifted, or they can have a severe cognitive disability, and in addition to having an autism spectrum disorder. So it becomes confusing, and I think we try to provide folks with generalizations, but there's also a point where there has to be an understanding of the individual. You know, for example, one of the things that as I'm sitting here, I realize we've been talking about some of the challenges or deficits of individuals. But I have to tell you, I was in doing a tour in Philadelphia several years ago, and the tour guide was someone on the autism spectrum. And I thought it was fabulous because he knew every fact about the building that we were in and could answer questions beautifully. So understand that our folks come to you not only with challenges, but also with great gifts as well, and can be wonderful tour guides and really have a lot of interest and knowledge about certain situations.
Kathy, one aspect that I really appreciate that you just pointed out is that a person may have an autism spectrum disorder while at the same time may also have a cognitive disability, that it's not always an either or kind of situation. And I think that's important for people to realize. Under those circumstances, is there any type of advice if a person does have an intellectual disability in terms of understanding some of the materials that we would discuss in a national park, whether it's historic information or natural information? Is there any advice that you could give in terms of what types of observations that we could make if a person is with a family member, and let's say it's a group of families on a Sunday afternoon, and a person has not self-identified, or the family unit has not self-identified? Are there things that our rangers should just be a little bit more observant of, certain types of behaviors, or anything that we should be aware of?
You know, my sense of it is that if there's somebody in the midst of a group who has a more significant cognitive disability, it will be somewhat apparent. And I think the goals for them to be in your programs may be very different than other people. So for example, if you have someone who has an interest in, the state park, whatever it is, so the way that you can interact with them is for them to find out facts about the state park. If you have somebody who has a more cognitive disability, who is not going to be as interested in the more intellectual side of it, or finding out the facts, then maybe for them what it is a good nature walk, or just an opportunity to be outside. So I think the main thing is to understand that for different people, there's going to be different goals based on what their capabilities are.
And I think the one I'm going to say what might be the $1 million question today is, if someone observes that, let's say one of our rangers or volunteers observes that a person may have a cognitive or an intellectual disability, how do you ask the question, of either the individual or the family member, how do you start that conversation so that both the ranger and the family remain comfortable in initiating that? How do you see that happening?
Well, I think that you can ask a question just to say, is there anything that we can do to support you and your family or you and your group better today? Is there anything that I need to know that will help me be more effective in what I'm doing?
Great, thank you. I really like that.
And I think the other thing is, Ray, realize that for these families and these professionals who would be with individuals who have more severe cognitive disabilities, they have figured out the accommodations that work or don't work with the individual. So again, using those words of just saying, are there any special accommodations we could provide for you?
Okay. Christy, I want to come back to you. Again, do you have any questions, either yourself or any that have come in on the chat that we can address while we still have time?
Yeah, so we have a couple of questions on the chat. The first one, I'm going to ask it the way it was asked, but then I'm going to give the guidance from the Park Service side and then see what Kathy and Jordan think about what the Park Service says we should do. So the question is, we have accessibility pages on the NPS website, and is it correct to use the term cognitive services, intellectual services, or other? And what I wanted to throw in is we do have guidance for what we're supposed to put, and the guidance says we're supposed to put cognitive/learning disabilities. That's what we call it. But I wanted to see what Kathy and Jordan thought about that, if they had better advice for what we should do.
Great question.
Jordan, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, me personally, I don't take offense to any certain terminology of how you phrase it. So I think that either or, like the cognitive disabilities or learning disabilities, would be just fine.
Okay, Kathy?
I agree with Jordan. I think, what you will find is in the disability community are that there are advocates who have some very strong feelings about some things. Like in the world of autism, some people, and Ray, you asked this question of Jordan before we started, some people who are on the autism spectrum prefer to be called autistic people. So, I think that whatever we choose to do, there's going to be folks who have opinions about it. And I'm absolutely comfortable with cognitive/learning disabilities.
Okay. Christy, any other questions?
Yes, this one, it isn't phrased as a question, but I think it could be. So let's go with that. It says, when offering the Junior Ranger program to young people, we need to recognize that not all people will be able to do the activities for their age group. We need to be flexible and let them know they can make decisions about what they would like to do. And my question to add to that is, do you have any advice on that? Currently, our Junior Ranger books are set up in most places with very specific age activities. And if you don't do the required number of activities in your age group, you don't earn the Junior Ranger badge.
Christy, could you give the 15-second version for both Jordan and Kathy of what's a Junior Ranger program?
Sure. I probably could even recite the pledge, but I'm not going to. So it's an activity book that we give to kids when they enter parks. And depending on the park, it's very specific to like the actual park. At Grand Canyon, we had like 6 different Junior Ranger books, depending on where you were in the park. But it's a set of activities meant to increase the amount of information that that Junior Rangers or that kids are getting about the park, but increase their ability to interact with the park. And they do a certain amount of activities based on their age group. They usually attend a program, a ranger-led program, so either a tour or a talk or a walk. And then they go back to the visitor center. They talk about what they learned. They get signed a little signed certificate. They do a pledge and they get a badge as like a mark of honor. And there are kids who like go and try and get every single badge in every single park. And they come in with vests that are down to the floor, just covered in these little plastic badges.
Jordan, you want to comment first?
Yeah, I would say to maybe the first thing that came to mind when I heard that question was maybe say like to get this badge or whatever it is called, you need to do like 6 out of 10 of these activities to maybe give people some flexibility in what they want to do, so they don't feel like they have to do every single activity that's listed.
And Kathy, along those same lines, as Christy mentioned, there are usually a variety of different Ranger books based on the age group. And how would be the best way to make sure that the individual with a cognitive disability is able to get the age group based on their ability, so that they have the ability to actually achieve? I mean, the most important thing with the Junior Ranger program is that a person leaves with the badge, but with the idea of they engaged in that park. It's not a matter of, did you pass a test because that's what's necessary. It's, did you enjoy, did you engage, and did you enjoy? And we want to make sure that people are getting the right book based on the ability that of what they would be able to achieve. How do we have that happen?
That's a really difficult question, because, if you have a 25-year-old who comes in who has the cognitive ability of, say, a 5-year-old, you don't want to be giving them baby things. You want to acknowledge their age, and that's just kind of an extreme case. So it's just simplifying some of the information. The other thing that I would say is that just something to be sensitive to. We have a lot of individuals who have disabilities, whether they're cognitive or they're an autism spectrum disorder, who experience a lot of failure in their life. And one of the things that I know, as someone who's worked with individuals through the years, is that we get the best outcomes when we build that relationship, but we also help the individual be successful. And so I think, trying to figure out, maybe it's doing fewer activities or whatever it is, because our folks also, individuals on the autism spectrum, for example, like to do things to perfection, and they have criteria about how they want to get things done. And so if something is too complicated, they may not be able to make it through all the activities. So again, understanding what those accommodations are for that individual and helping them to feel successful. Because if they come to your park and they have a successful experience, they're going to be more prone to come back a second time. If they don't, they're going to be prone not to come back a second time.
Thank you. I really appreciate that answer. I know that was a difficult question. Christy, any other questions in?
Yes, and I just wanted to follow up with some of the comments that have come in about the Junior Ranger program. One person wrote, "My daughter can't read or write, although she's 18, but can understand and respond to activities. She would need to do more visual activity." Someone else wrote, "At my park, we're not very strict about completion. We look for attempt and engagement as well as completion." And I think that's the shift that has to happen. And this is now me speaking. I think that's the shift that has to happen in parks, is for so long we've been focused on, you have to do the activities of your age group to completion. You have to get them done. And now changing it to, are you benefiting from the program? Are you engaging with the program? Are you, have you done what it means to be a Junior Ranger, which is to learn more and to be an advocate for the park that you're at? So that's my own 2 cents on how we need to change things. And then we had a question come in saying, "Could someone please recap Kathy's suggestion for how to approach a family or group that might include someone with cognitive disabilities?" So if you can just say that again, Kathy, I think people would benefit from it.
I think one of the things that I would not do is go up to them and say, "What's going on with your child?" Or "What's wrong with your child?" And I don't think that any of you would be insensitive enough to do that. But I think just to say, we try to support everyone in the park to have a successful experience. Are there certain kinds of accommodations or recommendations that you have that will help your family or your group be more successful?
Kathy, I want to follow up with Jordan on the issue that you just brought up, and that is you brought up the issue of something that a person shouldn't say. Jordan, along those lines, are there a few pieces of advice that you would suggest for our rangers and our volunteers of things that they absolutely shouldn't do, things that would just behaviors that someone may do or experiences that you have had that you would recommend people not do? What are some of those no-nos people need to be aware of?
Yeah, so actually, in my experience, when I was younger, around like 13, I went to a park and someone had asked my mom a similar question to that effect. And she told them that I had autism. And after that, they kind of treated me different and kind of spoke like slow to me, like as if I couldn't understand if they just spoke normally. So I would just say, like, if a family answers yes to that question, to not treat them differently, because that kind of made me feel like I was below them. So I think that when they answer it, just maybe like just talk to them the same, unless they tell you that you need to speak slower. That person just assumed that because I had autism that I wasn't capable of, following along with normal conversation.
Okay, thank you. Kathy, are there any things that you want to caution our staff of, any other things that you haven't already identified that would put our staff in a more comfortable situation as far as behaviors that they should not do?
I guess my kind of, as I'm thinking about my final thoughts, I think to realize that especially if a family is coming to the parks or to your facility or your program, whatever it is, realize that for a lot of our families, having a child with a disability is tough. And we have families in my world who are no longer invited to Christmas parties or birthday parties or events because of their son or daughter with a disability. I have a dear friend who has a son on the autism spectrum who also has co-occurring mental health issues, who for many years she would not even allow me to come into her home because she felt so ashamed of her child's behavior. So I think that it's not only a gift you can give, not only to the individual on the spectrum, but to the entire family, is showing acceptance and understanding. I remember when I was in college and I was told that 25% of us would experience disability in our lifetime or in our family's lifetime. I thought that was ridiculous. I didn't see how that could happen. And then my mom ended up spending the last 15 years of her life in a wheelchair. And so it taught me a lot about disability. So I think, when I first got involved in the field of autism, the incidence was 1 in 10,000. It's now 1 in 54. And so it's everywhere, it's impacting a lot of folks. And so I think that acceptance, giving families a place where they feel welcomed, is the best gift you can give them.
Kathy, you just used the word acceptance, and I'm also, on behalf of all people with disabilities, I'm also going to say respect. I think they need to go together. I want to thank both of you. Jordan, I know that as an individual who was self-advocating, I appreciate your willingness to do that on behalf of yourself and other individuals on the autism spectrum. Kathy, I appreciate everything that you've been willing to share with us today based on your professional background and everything that you have been doing at the Indiana Institute on Disability and Community. I appreciate the time that you've given. I want to thank everyone who has joined us on this call. And I also want to say our next 2 calls, because we are going into the month of October, which focuses on awareness of employment of individuals with disabilities. Our first call on October 6th is going to be focusing on the Employee Resource Group, Employees for the Advancement of People with Disabilities, and what is that organization about, and how do we in the National Park Service benefit as a result of that Employee Resource Group's existence. And then on the 22nd of October, we're going to have another disability dialogue call, and it is going to focus on the use of technology, and we'll have 2 different people that will be demonstrating and talking about the technology that they use. I also want to thank Christy for her assistance in helping us get through the technology, the questions, and supporting me throughout all of the calls, both in the past and as we go into the future. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jordan. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Christy.